Hi folks, thanks for joining me. If you're a returning subscriber, welcome back, and if you're new to the channel, please consider clicking that subscribe button. I would really appreciate your support. So this week we're going to tie a bloodworm pattern, and without further ado, let's get into it. In the vise then is a Hanak H260 barbless hook. This one's at size 8 and it's on a heavy wire in black nickel. The thread I'm going to be using today is a UTC thread. It's red and it's at 140 denier. Unfortunately I've lost the label so I can't show you that. Now usually I would either add some super glue to the shank of the hook or I would use wax, but on this occasion I'm just going straight with the thread, and the reason for that is it's going to form quite a good part of my body. So I'm going to catch in just behind the eye, and using the rat's tail I'm going to come down 3 or 4 turns. Once I've got the rat's tail out the way, I'm going to just snip away my waste. Next then we're going to add our rib, and I'm going to be using a shank of Flexi Floss that I've got here. I've already got a strand picked out and I'm going to lay it on to the thorax area and bring my thread over to meet that. Don't worry overly much about the tag here, we'll sort that out in a sec, but once you've got it well clamped down, stretch it out, and this just helps to give the body a little taper. So I'm going to come all the way back to well past where a barb would be on a hook actually. And then I can lay my Flexi Floss to the side. I'll just take a little bit of that off, I don't need it all. But it just pays to have that little bit as you're pulling. So if it sneaks back because you haven't got any wax and you haven't got any super glue, you've got that little bit to play with. Okay, next then I'm going to come in with some Mirage. This is Pearl Tinsel Medium Ice Blue. Now I would have liked large, but I'm waiting on an order coming from Troutline, and because we're now on the big Brexit, I'm afraid the orders are taking a lot longer to come through. So I'm just going to catch that in at the base here, and then I can start working my thread back up the body. Now what I want to do, and I'm using UTC, is I can flatten the thread out just by simply giving it a little twist anti-clockwise, and that makes it nice and flat so I can really work on my body. Now I'm going to pause there in the thorax area, and I'm going to bring my Pearl Tinsel up the body, and I want this to cover all my thread wraps. Now usually when I'm doing this I would use the rotary function on the vise, but I know a lot of yous, there's a few people message me saying, oh well, you know, my vise hasn't got a rotary function, would you stop using it? It is difficult because I've kind of got used to it now, and it's a great boon. So anyone that was sort of asking about, you know, what should I buy, you really need to, if you're going to get into the hobby, a rotary vise is kind of essential, I would say, for the longer term. So I've brought that rib all the way up, and I'm going to catch it in the thorax area with a couple of turns of my thread. So once I've got a couple of turns over the tinsel, a couple of turns in front, I can come in and remove the excess. So far so good. Next I'm going to bring my thread all the way to the front, and I'm going to add a little bit of UV resin. I'm using the Solaris UV Bone Dry. I know the label's a little bit tagged, but I'm just going to get a coat of resin over the top here. Just make sure it's coated underneath. like so. Doesn't have to be a thick coat, and that's where the old bone dry comes in handy with a little brush. Really makes a difference. Now, you would think I was going to bring my rib up through that, but that's not the case. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cure this now. And what this does is it gives me a clear body through to the red thread, and it gives the fly a little bit of a 3D effect, if you like. I've never been a great fan of bloodworm patterns until I fished with Al Owen a few years back. In fact, the first time I fished with him, I fished with Al a few times, and we were fishing an AMFC match, and he'd obviously took the engine. For those that don't know Al, he's a professional fly fishing guide at Rutland Water, but he was representing Grapham Water at a league match that we were fishing up there, and I drew him in the boat, and obviously he took the engine. He knows the reservoir very well, and he took me up the South Arm, and I'd set up with a floating line and 3 hares there, I think. And the first drift I quickly put 3 fish in the boat, and Al, generally competition anglers, you know, if they're very quick to switch to the method that's going to work. And I said to Al, I said, look Al, I'm fishing a floating line and just three hares there, so it's very simple. Sorry, what I'm doing now is I'm just stretching this out to get my ribs started, and the first turn's almost on the butt of the hook, and then I'm going to come up, just easing the pressure on the Flexi Floss to make the rib a little bit bigger as we get up near the thorax area. Yeah, so I'd quickly boated 3 fish and feeling quite pleased with myself. And I'd said to Al, oh, look Al, I'm doing this and I'm doing that, and he said to me, oh, don't worry Lindsay, they'll come, you know. And I said, well, what are you doing? And he was fishing a line that's, I think it's still available, called Cortland Ghost Tip, and pretty much it's a floating line with 15 foot of intermediate line on the end. It's a line I wasn't a big fan of at the time, and I'm still not, actually. I didn't like the line. Hinged terrible when you cast. And he was fishing pretty much 3 bloodworm patterns, and I said, oh well, you know, I'm getting fish on the hare's ears, and he goes, oh, don't worry, they'll come. And what's the point of the story? Sorry, I'm drivelling on. So the point of the story is he had the courage to stand by and was confident enough to fish them flies, and he wasn't very long in catching a bag full of fish. And he did show me the pattern. This isn't it. Unfortunately it's not my pattern to give away, but this is something very similar. So next I'm going to tie in some flash for the side. I've got some very thin red holographic here, and you just see me take a little bit off. So I'm going to catch in on my side first with a couple of turns like so, and then I'm going to come over the top, excuse my fingers, turning it round to bring it to your side, and then I can start concentrating on building a nice thorax there. And the 260 is a heavyweight. Sorry, gibbering. The 260 is a heavy gauge wire hook, so it's really going to help this pattern sink with the profile. And you know, you can put as many layers of varnish and resin on this as you like, and it'll just all help with getting the fly down very quickly. So what I tend to do with this pattern, especially early season, which is just round the corner I might add, is I fish it on the point, because there is a lot of fish still grubbing round the bottom feeding on bloodworm. So this on the point with normal sort of barkers, buzzers on the droppers above it. So I've just caught that in, and then I'm going to grab my whip finish tool and just give that a few few turns. It's a good looking pattern actually, just to sort of hold in the hand and look at, and it's a great pattern to photograph, as you obviously seen from the thumbnail, but it is a very effective fish catcher. So next I'm going to start with some UV resin, and I'm only going to give it one coat for the purpose of the videos, but I would generally give this fly several coats of resin, and I'd probably finish it off with a couple of coats of Sally Hansen hard as nails. But I'm sure you do not want me, you know, it'd be like you watching me doing my nails, so I'm not gonna labour the point, but just a couple of coats. And the thing with the resin is, if you apply it in nice thin coats, you'll get that really nice finish that you see in the photographs. People have problems with the resins when they start pouring it on like it's going out of fashion, and then it does present a problem. So I'll just come in with a torch, make sure that's properly dry before you put the next coat on. And it's the same with the varnish. Al's very famous for his buzzers actually, and one of the things, when he was telling me how he does it, he obviously ties up in bulk, and he'll put one coat of varnish on and give it 24 hours to dry before applying up to 6 coats of varnish on his buzzers. Now that's dedication. I'm not that diligent, but you can see, when you see Al Owen's buzzers, you'll recognise the finish because they are immaculate. So there we go, I'm going to finish at that on camera, and I will add extra layers of varnish once we're done here. Thanks very much for watching. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please think about clicking that subscribe button. I would really appreciate your support. Initially, and then as I start to get a little bit of purchase onto it, I can then concentrate on pulling